Welcome back to the Grease Goblins Reread channel. Today's video, we're going to be doing Theon IV, A Clash of Kings. Theon has now taken Winterfell, and we're now going to the other side of this. So when Theon took over Winterfell, we saw it through Bran's point of view. Now we're going to flip that, go to Theon's. How is Theon dealing with holding the castle, the fallout of the whole Bran plotline? And what's interesting is we're not going to see Bran until the very end of the book. Anyway, so Theon will kind of command a bit of a dominant presence, being one of the only other POVs that are going to have like multiple chapters left outside of like a character like, Tyrion or Sansa. And so this chapter is going to follow Theon trying to hunt and find Bran and Rickon as they have escaped from Winterfell, or at least in Theon's mind, they've escaped Winterfell. As we get into page 541 to start it off. Theon wakes suddenly in the middle of the night with a sense that something disturbed him. Kyra, the tavern wench he brought into Lord Stark's bed, lies beside him, her arm draped over him. Instantly, we get a feeling that Theon should feel a bit calmer, right? He's taken over the castle. This is where he grew up into more of his formidable years. He should feel safe, but he doesn't. Something seems to unnerved him, and now we know that, of course, Bran and Rickon are going to be set free, but at this point, we don't know that. And so the way I kind of look at Winterfell for Theon is Theon knows what he's done is wrong. Taking, over Winterfell and betraying Robb and all this stuff, and he's put to death people that he, came to know and like. And so at this point of the story, Theon is somebody that feels kind of trapped. Even if he doesn't realize it yet, he's already trapped. He's betrayed the Northmen, that they'll never love him. But also the Greyjoys are not going to send him any help either. He's been left out to die. And so at this point, Theon feels that. It almost feels like some of the chapters we have at Harrenhal with Arya and how people react to the ghosts of Harrenhal. Here is kind of the same, where Winterfell and the old gods seem to be pushing Theon out. There seems to be a disturbance there. We also know that, again, Theon bringing Kyra into his bed seems almost like yes, Theon's a very lusty person, but it almost seems like a disrespectful manner to the Stark legacy. Like, here is Theon, he's taken over the castle and he's sleeping with some random woman in Ned Stark's bed. It's kind of supposed to make Theon feel better about himself, like he's so much better than everybody else. That's kind of the way I read it. Wex, his mute squire, sleeps rolled in a cloak on the floor, and Theon listens carefully. Only wind at the shutters and the distant cry of a cat in heat. Theon listens carefully, but really only hears the wind at the shutters. He convinces himself it was nothing, no voices, no alarms, no movement in the castle, but still Theon feels uneasy. And this is the part he should feel uneasy about. Why is it so quiet? There are direwolves that howl all through the night. That's something we've been going all the way back to a Game of Thrones that people noted upon, is that it's never truly quiet at Winterfell, and here even more so with the distress of the Greyjoys taking over. That's something Theon's going to figure out here in a second. He opens the shutters and leans into the cold night. Already he's cold, he's basically naked, and you're opening it into the harsh north. You're going to be a little cold, Theon. But from the window he sees dark towers, empty courtyards, a black sky filled with countless stars, the half moon above the bell tower, and its reflection glimmering on the glass gardens. What's so interesting about what we just learned here, think about the way it's painting Winterfell. We've always seen Winterfell through the eyes of the Stark kids being their home and being this very happy and, safe place for them. But here with Theon, it's described as almost being gloomy, very similar to Harrenhal. There are a lot of connections with what someone like, Arya or any of the people at Harrenhal would feel towards Harrenhal and the way Theon feels towards Winterfell. Still, the silence remains, too quiet though, as Theon continues to try and dismiss it. He wants to go back to bed or to even have sex with Kyra again, but something is lingering in his mind, that something is not right. As we get into page 542, Theon tells himself he should rejoice at having taken Winterfell, with fewer than 30 men, but the silence unsettles him. Now it's paranoia, right? So you're Theon and you don't have a lot of men, for one, to guard the castle. You can't even protect both of the walls that Winterfell has. You only have them on the inner wall. You don't have the men to hold the castle. And that's kind of what Theon is kind of realizing. But at the same time, this is a great feat. He was able to take one of the mightiest castles in all of Westeros with only a handful of men. But also it goes into the fact that what Theon is doing, he subconsciously knows is wrong, and that he's betrayed everything he knows. He notices the absence of the direwolf's howls, which he has grown used to. He orders Erzin, the guard outside his door, to check on the wolves, as he wakes Wex and sends him to confirm that Bran and Rickon are in their beds. And this is the whole thing that sparks it, is, yes, you've become so accustomed to some of the sounds of Winterfell, like the wolves, that you don't even realize that they're not howling for a little while now. And this is when the kind of the hammer is going to strike for Theon, his first big, mistake in terms of once he has Winterfell, that Bran and Rickon are going to escape. That Theon's hold on Winterfell is not nearly as good as he thought it was. Kyra stirs, but Theon dismisses her, telling her to go back to sleep. While waiting, Theon drinks wine and worries that he has too few men. And that's the case. Theon does have too few men. He can't guard everything. He can't, he didn't even have men stationed on Bran and Rickon's rooms because he doesn't have the men. He needs at least almost a third of his garrison just to be manning the gate and the walls and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot. You got to be thinking those men have got to shift. They're not watching them 24/7. They're watching them in shifts. So you don't have men to really be watching all these other spots. And that's what it really comes down to. If Theon was given more men by, like, say, Asha or whoever, he would be able to hold Winterfell much longer. Wex returns quickly, shaking his head to signal that the Stark boys are not in their chambers. Theon hurriedly dresses in his tunic, breeches, and a studded jerkin, and arms himself with a long sword and dagger. Theon is realizing that this is a very serious situation. His grip of having 2 Stark hostages may be gone. That was a key point of Theon being able to hold Winterfell, because if somebody had attacked Winterfell, for instance, Theon could always threaten Bran and Rickon's lives, that he would kill them if they didn't leave. That's something that he has the ability to do, but now he's lost a piece on the chessboard. Erzin then returns to report that the direwolves are gone, as well as Theon orders the castle roused and everyone herded into the yard to see who is missing. He also orders Lauren to check the gates. He wants to know, where did they go? So now that they've escaped, the direwolves are gone, and where are they heading to? And that's the big point for Theon, is that Theon also has to realize that if they are on the run, he has a very good chance of finding them. He has hounds, he has, horses, all that kind of stuff. He can get them, but he has to know where they went. He takes Wex with him, all the while worrying about Asha's reaction if she learns the Stark boys have escaped. Bran's chamber is found empty, and so is Rickon's, confirming their disappearance. And really what Theon is worried about more is his image, right? So already he's kind of burnt that bridge with the Northmen betraying Robb. Now all he has left is the Greyjoys. And if Theon let, a cripple, a little boy, get out of his custody, it makes Theon look like a fool, makes him look weak. And remember, all the Greyjoy culture really is about strength and your ability to be a captain of a ship. Theon, for one, is not all that great with being a captain of an entire fleet. He doesn't have that experience. And 2, he seems to be acting the fool once again. Theon curses himself for not leaving guards on the Stark children, having thought it more important to man the walls and gates. It's tough because on one hand, if I was Theon, I would also be much more worried about somebody trying to sneak into the castle or invading the castle at the middle of the night. Not necessarily that Bran and Rickon would try and escape. So I don't blame Theon too much for that. As we get into page 543. Theon hears the castle folk sobbing as they are driven into the yard and resents their ingratitude despite his efforts to be just. This is the craziest part. Theon doesn't understand why these people would hate him so much, or why they wouldn't be happy about him being their ruler. Theon is a foreign invader. He's somebody that has completely betrayed the Starks. He was somebody that grew up here. A lot of the people that he's looking out at, knew him when he was a child, when he came to Winterfell for the first time, and helped him become the person that he is. And here he is killing people, within the Winterfell people, more or less. Here he is doing all this stuff to them, gathering them in the middle of the night, not even allowing them to dress. Of course they're going to hate him. There's no love for Theon, and the fact that Theon expects that is kind of the craziest part. He recalls punishing 2 of his men for sexually assaulting the kennel girl and sparing others when he sacrificed Septon Chael, but still feels the castle folk blame him unfairly. This is the crazy part. You're drowning people, all this kind of stuff. Jojen's dream has finally kind of come into fruition here with the deaths of Chael and the others. It's crazy that he thinks that all these people should be looking at him with gratitude, all this stuff, after he's just been murdering people. His own men are not listening to him, sexually assaulting people. The castle is living in kind of fear and towards Theon distaste. Lauren, who says, "The Hunter's Gate best come see." The Hunter's Gate near the kennels and kitchens opened on fields and forests and was favored by hunting parties. It's kind of like the entrance to Winterfell that is much more hidden. Like, you're not walking through Wintertown, you're not walking through a bunch of people. It'd be the way you would go if you wanted to leave stealthily. And so if Bran and Rickon were on the run, it would make sense to go that way. And as we see, there's going to be a lot more signs that that is the case. Theon asks who had guard duty there, and he is told that Drennan and Squint. Theon prepares to punish them if they let the Stark boys escape, and at the gate they find Squint floating in the moat, entrails trailing behind him. Drennan lies half naked in the gatehouse, throat slit ear to ear, and breeches tangled and boots scattered. It's a very interesting sight because you're thinking about it like this. His guard looks like he was about to have sex or he was going to do something and then was killed. And the other guy looks like he was basically eaten on by a wolf. It's a really disturbing sign as Theon tries to put all this together. The evidence shows Drennan was with a woman, cheese on the table, 2 cups and an empty flagon, and his knife used in the murder. Theon deduces Drennan was distracted in the act when killed. Squint's body is pulled from the moat and is horribly mutilated. An arm is torn off, half his neck missing, a ragged hole where his navel and groin were, and torn bowels spilling out as he was hauled in. The stench to Theon is unbearable. So, as an audience, we know what happened because of what happens at the end of the book, but more or less Theon's going to deduce what probably happened here. Osha was dealing with the guard trying to seduce him and then killing him. And then on the other flip side of that, we saw that the wolves, eat the other guard and they try to hide his body to buy them time so they're not instantly spotted. As we get into page 544, Theon concludes the direwolves killed Drennan and Squint, and he reflects on Winterfell's Theon concludes that the direwolves must have been involved and reflects on Winterfell's massive defenses, true granite walls with a moat in between, the outer 80 feet high and the inner more than 100. With too few men, Theon had abandoned the outer defenses and kept his guards on the inner wall. It's quite smart if you're Theon, you just don't have the men to be able to garrison 2 different walls, and especially the outer wall, which is going to be a lot more wide, it's going to go around the castle a lot more. So it makes sense given the men that Theon has. He reasons that while the woman distracted Drennan, the others freed the wolves and lowered the drawbridge. Theon inspects the wall walk with a torch, finding clumsily mopped blood inside a crenel. He deduces Squint came to investigate the sound of the chains, was killed, and then his corpse shoved into a moat. Urzin notes that there were torches burning on nearby turrets, but Theon points out there are no guards there. Theon doesn't have all these men to guard every single spot on this wall. He has to have them very much scattered about. It's kind of like the Night's Watch and them trying to man the wall. They're very scattered and far in between. That is the point of it, is if you were going to escape Winterfell, you really only needed to kill 1 to 2 people, and that's what ended up happening here. Black Lorne reports there are 4 guards at the main gate and 5 walking the wall, as Urzin suggests that Squint could have blown his horn. And this gets an angry reaction from Theon because you have to put in the perspective of you're a guard and you're walking the walls. You've been doing it for hours. There's been literally nothing happening. And for one, you're going to be caught off guard because you're just not expecting anything to happen from inside the castle anyway. You're just kind of doing your patrol normally. And then just imagine all of a sudden you just see 2 eyes, or if it was both the direwolves, 4 eyes, and you see them within a blink of an eye rush you and they take you to the ground and just start ripping you, eating you alive. Think about that for a second. You're not going to be thinking about your horn and you're going to have no time to even get to it. And that's really what Theon tells Urzin as he basically shoves him to the ground and starts kind of showing what it would feel like if, Theon was a wolf. All of that, but the point still stands. Theon's right. This guy, Squint, just didn't have the opportunity to blow the horn. Theon regrets not killing the wolves the day they took Winterfell, but Black Yorn insists they must go after the Starks and the direwolves. So I will say this, Theon definitely should have killed the direwolves. In terms of them having a major risk, all that kind of stuff, it's the reason Walder Frey and the Freys kill Greywind. The 2 direwolves were a major issue in terms of if they ever got free. So I think Theon probably should have done it, but you got to remember Theon is trying to act like the just lord. He's not going to go out of his way to kill 2 direwolves. As we get into page 545, Theon refuses to chase the direwolves and fugitives in the dark, deciding to wait for daylight, which I believe to be a smart move. If you start going around trying to find footprints and all this stuff in the dark, it's going to be a lot harder to see. You might even destroy the track because you didn't see the trail initially. So I believe that that is the right decision from Theon, even though it does give Bran and Rickon more time to escape and get further away, but we know that's not actually the case, but that's what Theon is thinking at this moment. Theon walks before the crowds. Theon orders the castle folk into the yard where they stand frightened, some barely clothed, surrounded by armed men. And this is what they're thinking, right? Theon is trying to say that, oh yeah, he's this just lord, he treats them so well, but here they are being herded in the middle of the night, being treated horribly, they're scared, frightened, all that kind of stuff. They might fear Theon to some degree at this moment, But there's no love there, and fear can only get you so far, as Theon's going to find out. Theon walks before the crowd, studying faces for guilt. Reek reports 6 are missing: Bran, Rickon, Mira, Jojen, Hodor, and Osha. Theon immediately suspects Osha, recalling the second cup of wine by Drennan's body. It makes sense. Osha is very clever, and she would orchestrate really this whole plan. But who allowed for this plan to happen, right? It was Theon. Theon was the person that allowed her to come into his service, even armed her. Stupid decision that I pointed out there, and I also want to point out here. But Theon is also told that the stables were checked and no horses are missing, including Bran's pony, Dancer. Theon deduces that they are on foot, as Bran carried by Hodor, Rickon by Osha. He addresses the castle folk, demanding to know where the Starks went and who aided them. Really, this is a fruitless endeavor. We know that none of these people are really involved with Bran and Rickon and where they are, but why would they tell you? Like, that's the other part of this. Even if they were, they wouldn't tell Theon unless they were tortured or something along those lines, or their children were threatened, whatever. But either way, Theon is not going to get any answers from them. But the other big part of this is, why, if the Starks were able to get out of Winterfell, would they not take any horses? You know, horses could speed them on their way. They could be miles from Winterfell by the time Theon and his party set out against them. It makes you question some things. So you're telling me they went on foot on purpose. For what reason? And that's the reveal we're going to get towards the end of the book. But it's really interesting to try and figure out this from Theon's point of view, and as a first-time reader, what actually happened. No one speaks, only silence and the sound of the wind answer Theon asking about Bran and Rickon's whereabouts. Theon vows to bring the boys back by daylight and asks for huntsmen to help, offering wolf skins as a reward. He scans the faces of the yard, trying to read guilt, but sees only silence and cold stares. The people of Winterfell hate him. He appeals to old Nan, invoking Rickon's youth and fear, but she only gapes at him like he is a stranger. That's because Theon is a stranger. These people don't want to help Theon. If anything, they don't want to help Theon even more. Let Bran and Rickon get free, let them maybe get to the Umbers or the Karstarks, and let them come back and kill Theon. That's what a lot of these people are probably thinking. As we get into page 546. Theon accuses the castle folk of ingratitude, reminding them he spared them when he could have given them over to his men. None of the people meet his eyes, and he realizes they all hate him. And that is the truth. Nobody is going to like Theon for everything that he's done. Reek suggests flaying prisoners to uncover the truth, citing Lord Bolton's methods. And that's the issue, and that's the biggest, red flag. If you're Theon, you'll be thinking, wait, why is this guy all about flaying? Yeah, I know he was this Reek character that was a friend or companion of Ramsay Snow, but first suggestion that he brings up, Theon should be very distrustful of Reek as well. Think about the two people that we see swear their swords more or less to Theon. It's Reek and Osha, two people that will both betray Theon. Theon refuses, declaring there will be no flaying in the north while he rules. He's also reminded of the culture of the Boltons and how flaying is said to have been outlawed for basically 1,000 years or something along those lines. But is that truly the case? As who knows what the Boltons could be doing in the Dreadfort. Dawn approaches as Theon organizes a hunting party to find Bran, Rickon, and the others. He selects Joseph to saddle horses, plus Murch, Garrus, and Poxy Tim. He adds Agar, Rednose, Gelmar, Reek, and Wex from his own men. He commands Farland to bring hounds, threatening him by reminding him of Paula's safety, and Farland reluctantly agrees. Theon then orders Maester Luwin to join as well, not trusting him to remain behind, as young Walder Frey volunteers, claiming that he has hunting experience. Now, I will say this, you do want to have men, a lot of men in this party, because if you are to run into the direwolves, you're going to need a lot of men. There's 2 of them, and that's why Theon's bringing such a huge party. And it's interesting the way he's very smart in ideas like bring Maester Luwin along, because Maester Luwin, by himself here could try and get the Stark people to rise up against the few men that are left to guard Winterfell. It's a smart idea to bring Maester Luwin along, as well as some of these others. His cousin mocks him, but Theon allows him to come, warning he won't be nursed along if he falls behind. As we get into page 547, Theon leaves Black Lorne in charge of Winterfell, telling him to do with it as he will if they do not return. At dawn, he assembles his hunting party by the Hunter's Gate, 11 men, 2 boys, and 12 hounds. Gelmar arms himself with a long axe, Agar with steel greaves, Reek with a boar spear and a bulging sack. Theon carries his bow. All these people are trying to find weapons that are going to be useful against the direwolves because they're the real threat. And the thing with the direwolves is you want to have some sort of range. Like, you want to be able to hit them before they can get to you. And so if you're, wielding just a normal, like, sword, a sword doesn't have the biggest reach. So you'd have to really time it when the wolf is very close to you, or is going to just, like, jump into your spear of hitting them. But if you have something like a spear, you have something like a trident, you can kind of hold it out and they'll kind of go into it. That would be the thinking I would have. I also think a bow is a really good idea because you can just try and shoot the wolf before it even gets close to you. But yeah, that's what they're all trying to do. But the sack that Reek has is also very important because we know that Reek already has like a plan for this hunt. He already has the idea of just, hey, Theon, kill 2 random kids and dress them up as Starks. It just shows you how clever Reek can be, but also how much of a psychopath he can be. The trail is easy at first. Wolf paw prints, Hodor's heavy steps, and the reed's lighter marks show clearly. Farland's red bitch takes the scent and the hounds follow. Instead of fleeing south to Sir Roderick, the tracks lead north and northwest into the Wolfswood, which worries Theon. He fears they might fall into Asha's hands at Deepwood Motte and thinks he'd rather have them dead than captured. Really dark that you would rather have Bran and Rickon dead than see your prizes go to Asha and hurt your pride. That's a crazy thing to think about. But it also is really interesting of like, why would they go towards the Wolfswood? Like, that's the weirdest thing that you would think about here. If you're trying to get to safety, the Wolfswood is not the first place I would go. You would want to go maybe northeast. You would maybe want to go south or anywhere besides going west. Because west is like where all the Greyjoys are at this point. The party moves slowly through the misty evergreen forest, where uneven ground and pine needles make the footing treacherous for horses. Theon reassures himself that Bran and Rickon's group would be slower still. And that's the thing. If they're on foot, as we know that they were at the beginning, but they aren't anymore, they're somewhere else, it should be relatively easy to track them. And then also, you're mounted. You're going to be able to catch up to them relatively quickly. Maester Luwin rides beside him, remarking that hunting seems a little different from riding through the woods, as he's trying to get under Theon's skin, all that kind of stuff. Theon replies with a smile that hunting always ends in blood. A little bit of foreshadowing to what we know is going to happen by the end of this chapter, with 2 innocent boys being killed. Luwin urges mercy, calling the escape folly, and reminding him that these are his foster brothers. Theon dismisses the notion of brotherhood, saying only Robb had ever treated him so, but admits Bran and Rickon are more valuable alive than dead. And that is the truth. They are great hostages to have, all that kind of stuff. I will say this, though. It kind of goes to the fact that Theon really only felt loved by Robb, and that's kind of where the betrayal hits. And this is the other part of it, is like, we know, for instance, Bran, Rickon, Jon, Arya, they don't really care about Theon, whereas Robb did. The 2 were kind of close of age. Theon's a bit older than Robb, but you can understand why they grew up to really like each other, whereas Theon's a good, a couple years ahead of Bran. They're not going to be as close just because of an age gap. As we get into page 548, Theon considers Maester Luwin's words about the Reeds, realizing that holding Howland Reed's children might keep him in check. Because Luwin brings up the idea that you got to remember, where the whole Ironborn plan derives from is they are able to hold Moat Cailin. Well, if they have the Reeds, they have a good hostage over Howland Reed so that eventually, they could stop the Reeds from attacking them at Moat Cailin. But you've already lost that prize as well. But really what Luwin is doing is he's trying to save as many people's lives as he can without pushing it. So, for instance, he starts with Bran and Rickon, more than obvious that they're not going to be killed. Then Mira and Jojen, trying to save them because they're highborn, all that kind of stuff. And then he's going to go to Hodor. Luwin presses for mercy towards Hodor as well, reminding Theon of the boy's simple, obedient nature. And Theon reluctantly agrees, provided Hodor does not fight, but flatly refuses mercy for Osha calling her an oathbreaker. And Luwin accepts this. He's not trying to push his luck. He's not trying to say, oh, we should save Osha as well. Osha has murdered, a man already, and she also broke an oath to Theon. So, of course, she will die if they are caught. Theon reflects on the dangerous balance of mercy. Too much seems weak, too little monstrous, but he also muses on Ned Stark's daughters, regretting that they are not at Winterfell to strengthen his hold through marriage. It's so interesting because there's so much foreshadowing here where we know this exact thing is going to happen in Theon's POV in Book 5. Fake Arya is going to marry Ramsay. So it's interesting that you see that here. It's also really interesting the concept that Theon brings up. If you're too merciful, many will call you weak. But if you don't have any mercy, like Maegor, they're going to call you cruel. So that's the issue you run into, is like there's a middle ground that you have to have. You have to be willing to give mercy to your enemies, but also show them the strength and power to keep them in place and that you're not weak. That's something like what Jaehaerys does really well, and that's what Theon's trying to do, but he's not really leaning into that much at all. He's leaning more into just straight fear. The hunting party moves deeper into the Wolfswood, where the trees become ancient oaks and the ground is broken and overgrown. They pass a deserted crofter's cottage and a flooded quarry. The dogs bay and Theon rides ahead, only to find the carcass of a freshly killed elk. Wolves had eaten it, but none of the fugitives had taken any meat. This chapter, in my opinion, really reflects, I think, Bran's first chapter in Game of Thrones. Like, they come across an animal that's already been eaten, it's dead, whatever. It's this whole idea that once again the direwolves have grown up and now they're the ones that are hunting, all this kind of stuff. It's really just a nice little callback to that. But the one thing that Theon is going to struggle with, and he kind of notes as being strange, why has this elk only been eaten by the wolves? It still has a lot of meat on it. It seems like a waste. If Osha and her party went through this way, why didn't they take the meat off of this animal? Theon questions Farland, who insists the hounds are on the trail of Summer and Shaggy Dog, as Theon warns him that he had better be right. Less than an hour later, the trail leads to a muddy brook swollen by rain. At the brook, the dogs lose the scent. Farland and Wex wade across with the hounds, but find no tracks on the far bank. Farland reports that the fugitives entered the stream, but he cannot say where they came out. And this is where the big trickery is going to happen. There's so many different points that the direwolves could have come out, that anyone could have come out, and the big thing they're going to realize, specifically through Wex, is like, the boys didn't come this way. Like, the rest of the party did not come this way, only the direwolves. So the direwolves have led them astray, but also in your mind you should be thinking, well, if they didn't come this way, where did they go? They must have backtracked. As we get into page 549, Theon dismounted beside the brook, dipped his hand into the cold water, and reasoned the fugitives could not have stayed in long. He orders the dogs split half downstream while he went upstream. But then Wex suddenly clapped his hands and pointed. The tracks show the direwolf paw prints, but no sign of Hodor or the others, only the hunter's own boots. And if they had been here, you'd be able to see it. And this is where Theon is going to start to get very, very uncomfortable. Because at this point, they've now lost the tracks of where Rickon and Bran went. Yes, they can try and track the wolves. Maybe the wolves will lead them back to where they are. But even then, they also can't find the wolf tracks either once they went into this little stream/river. That's a really big problem. Because now you are also going to want to go back and try to figure out where you lost the scent or where you lost their footprint. But you're also going to try and figure out where the direwolves went. And for both things, they're going to come up empty. Joseph noted that Hodor carrying Bran should have left deep prints, but none were present, as Theon realized Osha must have split away earlier, sending the wolves alone to mislead them. Which is the truth, that is the case. Theon picks up on that, but he doesn't fully grasp that idea. He accused his huntsmen of treachery, but Garrus swore that there had only been the one trail, and insisted the direwolves would have never left the Stark boys long. Theon split the party. Garrus, Murch, and 4 dogs were sent to recheck the trail, with Agar watching them. Theon, Farland, Wex, Rednose, and Walder Frey continued following the wolves. And this is the issue. So you're going to try and have one last ditch Hail Mary, try to figure out where they went. Unfortunately, it's going to come up with nothing. They split along both sides of the brook, hunting for tracks or signs of where the wolves might have left the water. They found plenty of animal signs: deer, elk, badger tracks, claw marks from a bear, even a vixen, and rabbits flushed from cover, but no trace of the direwolves. Theon pressed them to continue farther, convinced they would find something just beyond the next landmark. At this point, the world is collapsing in on Theon. He's growing desperate. There is no sign of where they went next, and if he can't find them, what is Theon going to do? He's going to lose pretty much all signs of having any type of competency, all of that. He's going to lose, really, Winterfell. The people will turn against him. And really, the North will obviously turn against him, which they already have. As we get into page 550. Theon pressed on longer than he should have, but by midday gave up in frustration. He could not believe Osha and the boys had managed to elude him, especially on foot while carrying Bran and Rickon. It seems crazy at this point that somehow they've eluded him when they were on foot. There's no way they should have been able to get away from him, but they have. He worried they might reach a village where the northern people would shelter them, provide mounts, food, and men to fight for them. That's the biggest concern you have, is that if Bran and Rickon are set free and they're able to go somewhere, they can, have people build an army around them, attack Winterfell. That's the whole big issue that you have. People will rally behind Bran and Rickon, like we're probably going to see within the Winds of Winter. We're already gotten teased by that, by the Melees trying to get Davos to find Rickon. all that kind of stuff. But does this also not remind you of, say, Robert during the Battle of the Bells, or I should say the before of the Battle of the Bells, where John Connington was trying to find Robert, but the people were hiding him from him? That's the same idea I get here. He clung to the hope that Farland's bitch would sniff out where the wolves left the water, but when they regrouped with Farland, his hopes collapsed. Farland explained that running water carried no scent, making it impossible for the hounds to track. Theon argued the wolves must have come out somewhere, but Farland said the direction upstream or downstream was unknown. These wolves have completely thrown off any type of pursuit by Farland and Theon. Reek suggested a man might run up a stream bed for miles, though he doubted wolves would. Theon still wondered, recalling the direwolves were not like others. As Garrus, Mersh, and Agar reported nothing from retracing their steps back toward Winterfell, the dogs grew restless, snapping at each other in frustration. Theon is going to give it one last attempt to just try and find them blindly almost at this point, because there are no tracks. Theon refused to admit defeat and ordered another search of the brook, determined to go as far as necessary. But at this, Walder Frey spoke up, saying they would never find the fugitives so long as the reeds were with them. Walder described the crannogmen as sneaks who skulk, use poison arrows, and vanish into bogs where their pursuers are lost. He even claimed their houses and castles moved like Grey Water Watch. He nervously warned they might already be hidden nearby, listening to every word the hunter said. We know this is not the case at all, but it goes to point to the idea of, you think about where the twins are actually relatively close to where the crannogmen are. Of course, they would have hostilities, all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, he is right. Like, the way that the crannogmen do battle is more guerrilla-type warfare. We see how that's going to affect the Ironborn at Mo Caelin. That's all very relevant. Like, that isn't necessarily all lies, but it is a little bit. As we get into page 551. Walder Frey unnerved the hunting party with talk of crannogmen being a swamp dwellers who stank of bog water, grew moss for hair, and could breathe mud. Theon nearly dismissed it, but Maester Luwin added to this, and I really think the reason that Luwin adds to this and builds the unease is to make their party leave, to go back to Winterfell, have their morale be even lower than it already is. Maester Luwin added that by recalling histories where crannogmen had grown close to the children of the forest, perhaps inheriting secret knowledge. And I do believe this to be the case, given the fact that we see somebody like Jojen, who is a dreamer, for instance. I do believe that to be the case, that the children of the forest, the old gods, are more in tune with the crannogmen of House Reed, all that kind of stuff. But I want to point out this one thing. We've seen throughout all of this that Bran and Luwin have had many discussions where Luwin tells him that magic doesn't exist. Or maybe it did at one point, but now it doesn't. The fact that Luwin's willing to bring this up tells you either one of two things. The first thing is Luwin's bringing this up just to get Theon and his party to stop hunting them. Or two, that because of the dream Jojen had and it coming true and all this kind of stuff, Luwin is starting to realize that maybe magic is true. Uneasy, Theon forced the party back to the stream, searching both banks as the woods grew darker and progress was slower. The trail remained lost, no prints and no sign of the direwolves or fugitives. As dusk turned to night, Joseph urged stopping before a horse was lamed, and Luwin agreed that pressing on by torchlight was fruitless. And that is the case. The same reason why they didn't go hunting the night before. Same idea here. You can't see any of these tracks. You're going to miss it, and if you miss it once, that's huge. So at this point, you can't really search for them any longer, and Theon feels that. He felt sick with failure, fearing the ridicule of the North and the wrath of his father, and Asha if he returned empty-handed. Theon is, his pride is ruined. He feels like he's done this great deed of taking Winterfell, but everything is falling apart. But at this, Reek then prompts some other type of action. Reek drew near and suggested another possibility. Perhaps the Stark boys had never gone this way at all. He insisted they may have gone north or east to the Umbers. Instead, he hinted they might be sheltering closer by, somewhere he claimed he might know. So we know that Ramsay is just kind of putting on something to just get them to stop this. They're not going to find them. And we know that Ramsay's had this whole lie prepared for a while, right? That's why he brought this bag. It's very interesting and clever the way Ramsay thinks, or Reek thinks, I guess, in this chapter. As we get into page 552. Reek suggested Bran and Rickon might be hiding at an old mill in the Acorn Water, recalling it from when he was a captive being brought to Winterfell. Theon knew the place well and had visited the miller's wife before, but he demanded to know why there and not elsewhere. Reek only smirked, saying he has a feeling. And this is the thing that's so interesting, is when we get to the idea of Theon killing these two kids and all that and the horrors that come with it, it's interesting because I think one of my favorite theories that there is not a lot of evidence to really support is that Theon is actually killing his own kids. That, he admits he had sexual encounters with the miller's wife. Maybe these are actually Theon's children that he's killing. That would be very interesting, albeit there's not a lot of evidence to back it. Suspicious, Theon pressed him further, and Reek dismounted and opened the sack he had brought from Winterfell, inviting Theon to look inside. Inside, Theon's hand closed on a silver and jet wolf's head brooch. Realization struck. The Stark's trail has been revealed. And we know why this is the case, that Theon is going to use this as a way to keep his pride and also resolve this whole conflict. Distrustful of his men, Theon chose only Gel, Agar, and Rednose to accompany him and Reek, dismissing the rest to Winterfell with the hounds. And at this, Maester Luwin knows there's been some sort of breakthrough. He tries to plead with Theon for their lives. He tries to get Theon to remember about his promise of mercy, but Theon's resolve has hardened. He declared that mercy had been for the morning. Now he was angry, and it was better to be feared than laughed at. And that is something that we see a lot of characters try to go through in this story, whether it's a character like Tywin, whether it's a character like Stannis, whether it's a character like Tyrion. Tyrion even thinks about that as well. Tyrion starts to dive into more of the fear element, all that kind of stuff. And this is a very dark chapter. Now, on your first read, you might not understand what's happening here. George does not make it crystal clear what's about to happen. But if you're an attentive reader and you're understanding, what is being said in this last page, you know what's going to happen. You know that what's going to end up happening is two children are going to be put in the place of Bran and Rickon, and that at that point, it's going to look like to everybody else that Bran and Rickon is dead. So a pretty good chapter from Theon IV. It really dives into his fall from grace is early on in this book, but him going further and further off the deep end and being so driven by being loved or respected or feared that he's willing to kill two innocent children. And it's a really dark chapter. And when you think about the way that A Clash of Kings goes, A Clash of Kings is a book that has some very dark themes to it, has some dark things happening in it. The mood very much sets up a very depressing vibe for the start of A Storm of Swords. This is why. You have one of these chapters like this. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on. Bye, guys.